Arcanist Ruins. The loading, I cut up the loading and I cut up the actual gameplay, not cheating in any way. The loading took longer than the actual gameplay. The mission we were able to complete like that. Loading was 5 minutes and 20 seconds total. The actual gameplay, 4 minutes, 23 seconds of actual gameplay. And this was for the Arcanist Ruins contract. And you'll be playing a lot of this shit over and over.
Ensuring a video game is complete before publishing is crucial to maintain player trust, satisfaction, and the game's reputation. Launching an incomplete game risks damaging the player's experience with technical issues, lack of content, and unmet expectations, leading to negative reviews, dwindling player numbers, and potential long-term damage to the game's brand and revenue. Anthem was hyped up due to several factors, including the reputation of its developer, BioWare, known for its successful franchises like Mass Effect and Dragon Age. The game's visually stunning trailers showcased innovative features like dynamic flying mechanics and cooperative gameplay, generating excitement among gamers. Additionally, the promise of a shared world experience with a rich sci-fi narrative appealed to fans of the genre, contributing to high expectations for Anthem's release. Development of Anthem started in 2012, after the release of Mass Effect 3, under the supervision of Casey Hudson, the executive producer of the original Mass Effect trilogy. Internally, the project was codenamed Dylan by BioWare, in reference to Bob Dylan, in hopes that it would be a name that would be spoken about years later. The working title, up to 2017, was Beyond. Around August of 2014, Hudson believed the team at BioWare Edmonton was in a sufficiently good place to continue without his oversight, and left BioWare. Some inside the Anthem team were concerned as Hudson's leadership on past games kept their team on point, in contrast to the current development of efforts on both Dragon Age Inquisition and Mass Effect Andromeda's teams. After Hudson's departure, the team started to struggle on the scaling aspects that impacted other parts of the development. In early 2015, Dragon Age's writer Dave Gator was assigned to the Anthem team to help with the story. Gator drew the story back towards something more common with Mass Effect and Dragon Age, rather than pull away from those series. The narrative shift put further strain on the artists and level designers to match with the story's direction. Gator left BioWare in early 2016, and the story was brought back towards what the team had originally envisioned. Furthermore, the team continued to struggle with the frostbite engine, as EA's management under Pat Soderlund wanted all of its studios to use the same technology. Frostbite was not originally designed for the purposes that the team had in mind for Anthem. BioWare had difficulty transitioning from some of the systems that built for Dragon Age and Mass Effect into Anthem, leading to the team scrapping some of their gameplay concepts like survival and crafting. Some of the BioWare team familiar with Frostbite were moved to support the FIFA series in 2016 when it transitioned to the Frostbite engine, leaving fewer to help with Anthem. 4 years into development, the developers expressed concern that Anthem was nowhere close to final production stages, and were facing similar issues to poor management of the project as had happened to Dragon Age and Mass Effect, as few concrete decisions were being made by lead designers. Despite trying to distance themselves from Bungie's Destiny, elements from that game, particularly related to the loot shooting aspects, started to appear in Anthem's gameplay as BioWare recognized that Bungie had greatly refined those elements. Several events forced many of the decisions in Anthem's final design. As part of the holiday tradition of BioWare, one team provided the staff with a demo of their current project to play and test over the Christmas holidays. In 2016 was Anthem's turn. The Christmas demo had reached Soderlund by early 2017. He expressed great concern with his state in contrast with the previous 2014 teaser, and ordered several senior members to fly to Stockholm, Sweden to discuss how to improve the game with EA DICE, Frostbite's creators. Soderlund told BioWare to create a new demo in anticipation of E3, which BioWare considered would be the end of the game if the demo did not impress Soderlund. BioWare spent 6 weeks to produce the best looking demo to show Soderlund when he was in visit to the studio in 2017 prior to E3. To put their best work forward, they re-added the flying aspect that had been added and removed several times over the course of development. Soderlund was impressed with the demo, particularly the flying. That demo served as the basis for the game's reveal at E3 2017. Just weeks prior to E3, EA notified BioWare that their desired name for the game, Beyond, would be too difficult to trademark. BioWare chose Anthem, one of their backup names, instead. Separately, Mass Effect Andromeda shipped. The BioWare Austin office shifted from that ship to help with Anthem. Andromeda had several problems at launch, drawing BioWare staff to resolve these issues. The game was not as successful, which put more pressure on the quality of Anthem. Even after resolving Andromeda, there was tension between the Edmonton and Austin teams, in part due to the lack of concrete decisions on gameplay elements. Around mid-2017, several BioWare staff departed the studio and one of the lead gameplay designers, Corey Gasper, suddenly died. The game was to have transitioned from pre-production to production around June of 2017, But as late as August, Anthem remained behind schedule. BioWare knew that they would miss the expected Q4 2018 release. EA refused to allow the game to be delayed past March of 2019. Around October 2017, Hudson returned as both the project lead and the new studio head. BioWare staff that had been working on a fourth Dragon Age game were moved to Anthem, including Mark Dara as executive producer. Dara took control, focusing the team on releasing Anthem by EA's deadline of firming decisions on elements of the game. BioWare developers speaking with Kotaku stated that most of the Anthem was effectively developed in a year prior to release due to Dara's leadership and pressure from EA. Because elements of Anthem were changing quickly, factors like game balance and narrative cohesion were difficult to address before launch. This further stressed BioWare, as there were a lot of departures in 2017 and 2018. When the storied studio BioWare would reveal its newest game, the plan had to go with a different title, Beyond. They even printed out Beyond t-shirts for the entire staff. Then, just a week before the Los Angeles press conference held by BioWare's parent company, Electronic Arts, word came down that securing the rights to the trademark would be too difficult. Beyond was ruled out. The leadership team quickly switched to one of their backup options, Anthem. But whereas Beyond has been indicative of what BioWare hoped the game would be, you go out beyond the walls of your fort into the dangerous wilds around you, Anthem really didn't mean much. Such a major last-minute upheaval might seem strange to the outside observer, but the Anthem, it was common. Many features weren't finalized or implemented until the very final months, and to some who worked on the project, it wasn't even clear what type of game Anthem even was until the E3 demo in June of 2017, less than 2 years before it actually came out. Throughout 2015 and 2016, it appeared to Anthem that they were accomplishing very little. They struggled with online infrastructure, they hadn't figured out how the missions would work, and what they had built, a few environments and creatures, still wasn't exactly what the basic gameplay might look like. The story was ever changing constantly, and progress on the game grew sluggish. One early idea was that there would be multiple cities, which eventually turned into a one city and player created outpost, which eventually turned into one city and a mobile strider base, which eventually turned into a single fort. Those earlier survival ideas melted away. Quote, they were still figuring out the core parts of the IP, like Ember, how technology worked, that sort of thing, said one of the former BioWare developers. The whole back-end architecture and everything wasn't figured out yet. At the same time, BioWare studio leadership had to focus so much of its attention on Mass Effect Andromeda, a game that was causing headaches for just about everyone, and whose rapidly approaching release date was set in stone. Put another way, Anthem might have started to look like it was on fire, but Andromeda was already nearly burnt to the ground. Complicating these problems further was the fact that sometimes when the Anthem leadership did make a decision, it would take weeks or even months for them to set it in action. There were a lot of plans, said a developer, where by the time they were implemented, it was a year later and the game had already evolved. The explanation for this lag can be summed up in one word, and that word was frostbite. When it came to development, frostbite was the Achilles heel of the entire project. Throughout those early years in development, the Anthem team realized that many of the ideas they originally conceived would be difficult, if not impossible, to create on frostbite. The engine allowed them to build big, beautiful levels, but it just wasn't equipped with the tools to support all of the ambitious prototypes that they've created. Slowly and gradually, they started cutting back on the environmental and survival features that they devised for Anthem, in a large part because they just weren't working. Even today, BioWare developers say Frostbite can make their jobs exponentially more difficult. Building new iterations on levels and mechanics can be challenging due to sluggish tools, while bugs that should take a few minutes to squash might require days of back and forth conversations. Quote, if it takes you a week to make a little bug fix, it discourages people from fixing bugs, quote, said one person who worked at Anthem. If you can hack around it, you can hack around it, and opposite is fixing it properly, said a second. I would say the biggest problem I had with Frostbite was how many steps you needed to do something basic. With another engine, I could do something myself, maybe a designer. Here's a complicated thing. From the beginning, Anthem's senior leadership had the decision to start from scratch from a large part of the game's technology, rather than use all the systems the company had already built for Inquisition and Andromeda. Part of this may have been the desire to stand out from those other teams, but another explanation was simple. Anthem was online. Other games were not. The inventory system that BioWare had already designed for Dragon Age on Frostbite may not stand up in an online game, so the Anthem team figured that they needed to build a new one. On February 24, 2021, Christian Daly, Anthem's 2.0 lead developer in terms of rebooting the game, announced it was cancelled. The writing was clearly on the wall, as just 2 weeks prior, a report confirmed that EA was meeting to decide the game's future. The announcement came from BioWare, but both companies were involved in the decision to cancel Anthem 2.0. Daly cited 2 reasons for the cancellation of the project: the COVID-19 pandemic and the need to focus on making Dragon Age and Mass Effect the best they can be. COVID-19 impacted much of the video game industry, and many of BioWare fans would not be happy if the new Dragon Age or Mass Effect game suffered. But still, it seems Anthem 2.0 went to its grave too early. First, it's worth discussing that what was promised and what was received. Fans know that Anthem wasn't in development as long as many of them had led to believe. Whereas many thought Anthem was in development for years, it was more like 18 months. The belief in BioWare magic, or the belief BioWare could do magical content in a short amount of time, was the big downfall. But Anthem itself looks so good. The concept and customization of javelins went so deep that it immediately caught many eyes. Running off a ledge, jumping, and taking to the skies felt so satisfying. This core feature was so well put together. The javelins themselves, despite a few flaws, were not what brought the game down. A real lack of live service material, a second-rate story, bad loot, general clunkiness, bad communication on content, and all more contributed to its downfall. A live service Iron Man simulator with a BioWare world full of lore, loot, and fun times was hardly the fault of Anthem's downfall. It had a great core idea once it all came together, but not enough time in the world to do it right. The cancellation ultimately came as no surprise, but had Anthem 2.0 been able to address and fix these things, its success could have followed through. After all, games have achieved this redemption before. No one believed in Cyberpunk 2077 after its disastrous launch, but it's trending positively right now. There are fans who believed in Anthem thanks to its unique core concept. It's pretty much impossible to tell how active the game actually is, but eventually, Anthem servers will shut down. That will be the final nail in the coffin for a community that still loves the game. The Anthem subreddit is very much alive, with constant posts day after day. It's certainly not the most active subreddit on the site, but there is some life in the game's community still. That's with it in its current state. Had BioWare and EA pushed forward with Anthem's 2.0 content, it stands reason its community would be thriving or just getting by. Still, for a game that has no real future, it's a remarkable accomplishment to retain even a remotely active community. Was Anthem good? No. It's a looter shooter with boring loot and even more boring shoot. But I like parts. Flying my cool exosuit around is pleasant, lazily swooping through the skies of an alien world. It's an involved movement too, because the suit slowly heats you up as you need to regularly cool by diving downwards or flying through waterfalls and such. Of course, Anthem in a short time made a mark with its javelins and in-game flight that stands out more than its faults, and it's something other game companies have certainly taken note of. When features are popular, they tend to appear in other games. Souls-like games are a whole genre based on the popular From Software formula, while FPS games use other features for years. And it'll be certain once other games and companies cash in on the Anthem's core concept and promise in future development of AAA titles with endless potential, the sky is the limit. Anthem ultimately failed to deliver on its promises of a captivating and immersive gaming experience, resulting in a disappointment for both players and developers alike.
William, knife man.